All right, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Flyers Daily, as always, presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. A little bit of a potpourri episode of Flyers Daily today. No game tonight. Flyers will be back in action tomorrow night when they face off against the Washington Capitals. What a turnaround by the Caps this year, by the way. I did not see this coming. Pierre-Luc Dubois, they make some couple savvy moves with an aging core, and Ovechkin's still just an absolute freak show. And all of a sudden, they're a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. They can get some goaltending. Look out for the Caps. Unbelievable. Have to see how they hold up against teams like Florida. But of the teams coming out of the Metro, I think they're a team that can do some damage in these playoffs. Win around maybe 2. Right now, if the season ended today, which it doesn't, they have 96 points. They have 10 more points than the second-place team in the conference. They would get the New York Rangers in the first round. Rangers are wild card number 2. That's crazy. Not Columbus anymore. Columbus was wild card number 1 about a week ago. They've gone on and lost 4 straight games. Meanwhile, the Senators have won 6 straight games. Montreal is knocking on the door with games in hand, 7-1-2 in their last 10. I mean, it's bananas. These final 2 wild card spots in the East are going to be pretty crazy, but we'll see the Caps coming up tomorrow night in D.C. as the 5-game road trip will continue. Flyers have been shut out back-to-back games, and scoring has been an issue. Got good goaltending for Fedotov. I failed to mention that in yesterday's episode. That's a huge faux pas by me. I thought he was really good in the game. Obviously, the only goal that he gives up is a breakaway against Nikita Kucherov, and there's no shame in that. Kucherov is fantastic. I thought that maybe Fedotov on the breakaway he obviously knew it was Kucherov coming down the ice as he basically went from the far blue line in all alone. So plenty of time to process that. And I think that sometimes a guy like Kucherov can kind of scare you as a goalie. I thought he took a lot of ice, was flowing back with him, but then he got a little bit too deep and defaulted to the butterfly. And a guy like Kucherov doesn't miss. I mean, 100 points in 5 straight seasons, more than any other Russian NHL player. He's fantastic, and he goes high blocker and beats him. But I thought Fedotov was great in the game. And, one of the things we're going to talk about in this episode is goaltending, because singularly, it has not undone the Flyers season, but it hasn't helped. And what was looking like an organizational strength just 18 months ago is now looking like an organizational huge question mark. And how do you resolve it going into next season? Now, I thought it was really interesting. John Torella, in a media availability last week, mentioned that Sam is more of a tandem goalie. Not going to ask him to play 50, 55 games. So does that mean he's a kind of a 1B? If that's the case, who's 1A? I know that Fedotov's played well of late. Is he 1A? I wouldn't feel comfortable with that going into next season. If you want to take a step forward next year, you have to bolster that position. You don't have to be the best in the league to move forward. You got to be able to get league average goaltending. If you can do that and make some improvements this summer of your club, you're in the mix for the playoffs. Absolutely. And, last year, it was what undone the Flyers down the stretch as well. So it's one of those things. If you want to go into next year and you want to take that step forward, I believe that management and the organization do. You've got to come up with a solution. I was looking at the free agent class for goaltending. It's not good. Going out there and signing a guy for a 2, 3, 4-year deal is not going to just bail you out while you wait for the development. And it's always questionable development, especially when it comes to goaltending, of Yegor Zavragin or Carson Bjarnason. So there's a lot of question marks with that position. Where do you go? Do you look in the UFA class? Here's the UFAs for goaltending if they want to solidify that position next year. Robin Lehner, obviously, not an option. Cal Peterson? No, we've been there, done that. Ville Husso? He's 30 years old. He makes $4.75 now. I'm not interested. Jake Ottinger? He's never going to become a free agent. Jake Allen? He's been good in New Jersey. Not a number one, though. Somebody you could look at. He's also going to be 35 years old by next year. Freddie Anderson can't stay healthy. Georgiev, not good enough. Anton Forsberg with Ottawa makes 2.7 now. He's also 32, going to be 33. Not interested. Marc-Andre Fleury, he's retiring, although I would probably be interested. Samsonov is never going to reach free agency. Devin Levi, no. Not going to get there as well. David Rittich, no thank you. James Reimers, 37, no thank you. I mean, there's not much here. Could you look at a guy like Alex Lyon? Is he a 1A? I love Al. I don't know that he's that at 32 years of age. He's a guy that can come in and give you really good quality. Eric Comrie from Winnipeg, do a pay raise. He's 29 years old. He's been the backup to Connor Hellebuck. We saw him last week. Played against the Flyers, played great. But is he a 1A is the question. Jack Campbell, no thank you. I mean, you can just go on and on down the list here. Jonas Johansson, nope. The guy's not out there free agent-wise. Do you take a look at a guy like John Gibson, who earlier this year I talked about him, and I was really against it because he's 31 years old. He tends to miss some games and not be available, and that's been the case again this year. Do you look at John Gibson, now $6.4 million cap hit and 2 more years? Do you look at John Gibson as a guy? He's 31 years old. He'll be 32 on July 14th, so this summer. This year he's played in 26 games. He's got a 282 goals against average and a 909 save percentage. Last year he played in 46, had an 888 save percentage and a 354. Horrible year for him. Horrible. Worst as a pro. 899 the year before that in 53 games. 56 games the year prior and a 904. Then you have the shortened season. He played 35 of the 48 games. So good amount. 51, 58. He's played 60 games in a season. And in that 60-game season, he had a 926 back at 17-18 and a 243 goals against average. Has had 914, 920. I mean, he's a good goalie. But can he stay healthy? Is that something you think about going into next year? Do you think about a John Gibson? Now, Pat Verbeek is, I think, asking for a pretty lofty price for him, too. So there's a cost per acquisition. What are you going to give up? Are you going to give up one of the first-round picks that you have and a prospect for John Gibson? I don't know. You have to think about it because the position is that important. That's how important it is. So that is something they're going to have to consider all options when it comes to goaltending this summer. All right, we're going to get to some emails, and I want to get to some comments from the YouTube comment section of yesterday's episode. One of the things I talked about yesterday was, in this rebuild, it's difficult. It's very difficult. Easy to say, hard to live is the way I put it. And I watched the interview John Torella did with Ashlyn Sullivan on NBC Sports Philly, the part 1. And he said this year's been really tough on him. And I know firsthand, it's been tough on the players. Losing wears on you as an athlete and a competitor. Because if it goes on too long, it can ruin you as an athlete and competitor. So I think it's incumbent that they start to steer this ship in the right direction, because there are guys like Travis Konechny going into this big contract and the commitment here, Travis Sanheim, Sean Couturier. They look at their career and they want to win. These guys want to be on a team and in a situation where they can win. Now, they committed here. They signed those contracts. So they believe in the plan. And when you negotiate those contracts, the organization, the GM, and the president, they lay out the plan for those players. They have to sell them on it because you only get one career. Couple that with the young players. They want to get this thing moving in the right direction and start winning too. So it's a hard thing to live through, a rebuild. And it's been difficult. And it's caused a lot of consternation. And it's been rough. Like, I get this email from Ed. He says, happy to see you back so soon. Monday's cast and Hockey and Hounds are my favorites. The only frustrating thing about the Monday episode with Bill is that reality has sunk in. He said, I'm not looking forward to a long spring and summer with no Flyers hockey. Hopefully they can get over the hump next season and we can get to watch some meaningful hockey. Stay strong and have a great week. Thanks for the email, Ed. You're absolutely right. You look at it and you go, I can tell you right now, when the playoffs start, in those first couple nights of round one, I'm going to be in a pissy mood. Why? Because the team that I work for, cover, grew up as a fan of, everything, is not in the party. We're not invited to the party. First round's crazy. The atmosphere, the buildings, the electricity of the crowds. There hasn't been a home playoff game here since 2018 because of the bubble. So yeah, I'm gonna be angry at that time. And I need to see that stuff come back. I mean, there's a whole generation of Flyer fans that are going through their entire high school existence and haven't seen playoff hockey. That's crazy to me, considering if you're of my vintage or close, when we were growing up, there was very few dry spells, very few. The playoffs, we took that for granted. That was going to happen no matter what. It was, can they be healthy and playing well at the right time? That's the thing. Look, now it's time to start building. But I think we also need to keep our expectations of this offseason in order. This isn't the offseason where all the money comes off the books. They'll have roughly $13 or $14 million after they sign their 3 restricted free agents of Cam York, Tyson Forster, and Noah Cates. Good amount of money. You can dip into that. You have more money coming off after that. Plus, you also have the Ryan Ellis money should you choose to LTIR him that you can play with as well. So they have a good amount of money. But this free agent class doesn't bowl me over. I'm not looking at this free agent class and going, boy, my 1C for my team for now and going forward is available, because I don't believe that he is. Sam Bennett, Brock Nelson as your 1C. They're good players, but they don't fit that 1C just because they're available. I think we have to be careful this offseason. I have said this my entire broadcasting career, and it took me a long time to figure it out. The key to happiness as a sports fan is managing your own expectations. Just because they have money and you say, hey, they need a 1C, they got to go out and get it. And if they don't get it this offseason and get a bona fide number 1 center, it's a failure. You got to have some perspective on it all. You got to look at everything. Who's available? Who may be available via trade? Can you accomplish this with an RFA offer sheet? How? There's different ways to go about it. But if you can manage your expectation that the 1C may not be attainable this offseason, it doesn't mean you can't upgrade. You can still upgrade, but your long-term 1C may not come this offseason. A top pairing right side defenseman may not come this offseason. Your bell cow goaltender may not come this offseason, but you can still improve. Maybe the 1C comes in the next free agent class when Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid are up. We'll see if either of them actually get to free agency. So you have to manage that expectation. It's hard to do. And it's like you're asking for patience longer. And like I said, we haven't seen a playoff game here since 2018 at Wells Fargo Center. Guy messaged in on the YouTube feed, said, hey, Jason, real big fan of the podcast. Great way to start the day. I've heard you talk about the Flyers having a goaltending problem, but I see it differently. Our goalies are showing real talent and heart. Sure, they have off games, but they're keeping us in most of them. The issue seems to be on offense and even some defensive breakdown. No goalie can win a 0-0 game, right? I'm not an expert when it comes to goaltending, but he feels that they have talent. And I'm not saying they don't have talent. That Fedotov, Kolosov, and Anderson don't have talent. And yet they have heart. But you got to look at the results. It's been too inconsistent. When you're at the bottom of the league, bottom 2, you got to look at it. This team in the Flyers, prior to the deadline and making the moves, is a team that has had decent defensive structure this year. There's just been too many goals that have gone in at horrible times, situationally, and that you just can't let in. You're not going to get away with it. They're not built to just outscore a soft goal. They haven't been built that way. Maybe they will be someday. I don't think you can go in with what you have now next year if you really want to ensure that you're going to take a step forward. I just don't think you can do it. Brian said regarding the effort in Tampa, he said, definitely wasn't due to a lack of effort in Tampa last night. The Flyers were just overmatched in most games right now. Totally agree. They've had a lot of attrition. And a team like Tampa, yeah, they can overmatch you. He said, I like what Obels brings, although I guess his age is against him to be a Flyer beyond this season. Fun fact, his dad, Artis Obels, what a name, was playing a season for my hometown team, the Odense Bulldogs in the Danish league back in the late 90s. Back then, with the dad of Frederick Anderson as our goalie, Freddie Anderson. We mentioned him earlier. Very cool. I don't think Obels is one of those guys that's, going to lead you to the promised land. He's played decently, but that's not going to be a guy that I'm going to concentrate a lot of my consternation or pin my hopes to as well. Trevsta 93 said this team is right where they should have been all year. Hope they get a quality prospect in the draft and move on from Rocky Thompson in the offseason. Power play has obviously been a huge issue. Mikey Halsey said, I was wrong. Flyers didn't have their annual overachieving winning streak so far. They are having their this is what we are, a no-talent team with one player who has talent but will never be better than Bedard. I guess he's referring to Matvei Michkov. And Bedard hasn't exactly lit it up. So maybe, and look, I'm not expecting Michkov to be Bedard. I'm expecting him to be Matvei Michkov. Lawrence Fine, 5020 says, fire Torts. At this point, the players aren't listening to him anymore. I don't know who to hire. That's what I talked about yesterday. If not him, who? That's Jones Briere's job to do. What I do know, Jason, is this team as it stands right now has next to nothing in talent except Michkov, TK, and Tippett, and they seem to have forgotten how to score. I'm tired of Torts, his benching, his temper, and his assistant coaches who can't even figure out the power play. Call me Neanderthal if you must, but I know Torts' tenure as head coach must be over after this season is mercifully over. By the way, hope you're feeling better. Thank you. Well, look, so you don't want to give me a name of who the next coach should be if you were to move on from John Tortora. That's fine. But what do you want that coach's philosophy to be? What do you want that coach, is he a high tempo, stretch the offense transition team? The Flyers are that now, by the way. They have last year and this year. They don't score because they don't have enough depth. And it's easy to match up against the Flyers, especially right now. And they've had some guys, frankly, when it comes to scoring, have underachieved. Owen Tippett's one of them. TK's been good all year. I think he's playing with some kind of injury that was sustained back in late January. Hasn't been right since. But Tippett, to me, takes a lot of shots, a lot of volume, misses the net a lot, and takes shots sometimes that I think that are ill-advised to take. I call them low IQ shots. They're shots without a purpose that are easy for a goaltender. But again, if to say that you need to get rid of Torts because the team isn't listening anymore, the first sure sign that a team is tuned out of coach is how they play, how hard they play, especially when the games mean nothing. And these games at the end of the season are not predicated on a determining factor if they're going to make the playoffs. Did you watch that Tampa game? Even the Carolina game, the Tampa game last week, all those games on the 5-game homestand. I haven't called their work ethic, their heart, their standard of play into question. Not for a second. That's the first thing that goes when players quit on a coach. They haven't done that at all. They blocked 31 shots the other night. A team that is out on the coach ain't blocking 31 shots, brother. It's not. They haven't tuned him out. There's a narrative about Torts, a preconceived notion about Torts. And look, a lot of it was earned earlier in his career. And I've gotten to know him pretty well, very well. And the way the guy cares for his players, you heard him say it the other day in a press conference. He said, I feel bad for these guys because they're out there busting their butt. And they had talent taken away from their team and not replaced this year. This team has not quit on the coach. I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason. Again, I think those decisions will be predicated, again, on who's available. Someone will say, well, hire David Carl from Denver, college coach. Has done a great job there, national championships, has done a great job with their world junior team, obviously gets today's young athlete. He's a young guy. But if the Flyers going to go down that road, first of all, if you're going to go after David Carl, you're going to have to guarantee him a 5-year contract. He's got a great situation where he is and a young family. He's not going to be a guy that's going to come for a 3-year deal, get hired to get fired like many head coaches are in the NHL. The security of the NHL job compared to the collegiate job is night and day. So you're going to have to give him a 5-year contract, big money. Are you going to go back into the college route again? Now, they went there with Dave Haxall, and a lot of people were not happy with Dave Haxall's tenure. He was a very good college coach. He was a guy that was getting looked at by a lot of teams for a number of years. But it didn't work out here in Philadelphia. Went to Seattle, had a good year, had another, and then got let go. Do you want to go David Carl? He's one of those names that's out there for a first-time head coach. Do you want to look at other guys that if Rick Tocchet becomes available in Vancouver, or is that just going to be considered Flyers, hiring another former Flyer? Look, they've hired non-former Flyers. AV had nothing to do with the organization. John Tortorella had nothing to do with the organization. We've seen Peter Laviolette when he was hired, had no connections to the Flyers, didn't play for him. We've seen both ways, and I think a lot of teams do this. Would Rick Tocchet be somebody that people would be interested in? What about Mike Sullivan, who comes from the John Tortorella coaching tree, but has 2 pretty recent Stanley Cups with the Penguins? If he gets let go in Pittsburgh, and I believe he will be, is that a guy that you want to go after? You look at a guy how I think is going to win the Jack Adams this year, and Stefan Carberry, and the job he's done with Washington. Do you try and find that guy? Do you want to go with a guy that's got no NHL head coaching experience? These are all things you can answer. So it's all part of the equation. Let's get to another one from the comment section. Comes from Flyers Purgatory. Without teammates, he'll never reach his ceiling. Big offseason for Danny. He's referring to Michkov. Yeah, he's going to need more. Boomer says keep the tank rolling at this point. Just get Michkov 10 more goals and we're good. Okay, I'm not sure what that signifies. So I'd love to see Michkov continue to pile it up. One last one. This comes from Flyers Purgatory also. He said, at no point in this season have the Flyers been outside the top 10 worst teams in the league. Yet I've heard you and a lot of others talk playoffs for 60 games. Now it's, I knew it all along. Really disingenuous. Okay. I responded to this guy's comment. I have never once in the preseason lead up to this season, in my bold predictions, in the season, which got off to a slow start, said that this would be a playoff team. I've been very consistent. The goaltending part was such a big question mark for me. I talked about things like, can you have a team that makes progress but doesn't have as good of a record as the year prior? Talked about that. So I don't know what you're listening to, buddy, but I have never said this team was a playoff team. And you look at the start of the season, have I talked about what they need to do to get into the mix and stretches of schedule? Yeah, we do a podcast every day. We talk about the team as they go throughout a season and what they need to do. I've never said this team's a playoff team. So I don't know if you have me mixed up with somebody else, but that's not something I've been preaching this year because I didn't believe it. It wasn't part of my bold predictions. I talked about the things they needed to do to be in that equation was score more goals. I talked about how they had to win at least 35 games, ROW, regulation overtime wins, which they haven't done anything close to. How they had to score more goals and give up less than last year. But I had huge question marks about it. Never did I talk about this team was going to be a playoff team this year. Email comes from Mark. It says, my name is Mark. I'm 46 years old. I live 20 minutes outside of Philly, and I've been a Flyers fan since the early 90s before Lindros got drafted. He said, anyway, I was just listening to your latest show. People are sending emails of when, if Torts gets let go or they don't renew his contract, if Luke Richardson is a guy that would be available. Luke Richardson most recently obviously coached in Chicago, got let go in season. He said, I think Briere Jonesy should hire him as the Flyers' new head coach. He said, most importantly, I'm keeping you in my thoughts and prayers, and I do hope you kick cancer's ass. I do too. Thanks for all the hard work that you do for Flyers Daily. Luke Richardson's another name we can throw into that. But again, are we going to get the people that trot out just tired narratives? Oh, they hired another former Flyer. Luke Richardson, he was a big hitter and a fighter. Broad Street Bullies. Here we go again. Maybe. Is he a guy that they would look at? I would think so. I think Luke. I talked to Chris Terrian quite a bit outside of when we do pregame, and he is very tight with Luke Richardson and said he is as sharp as they come when it comes to the game. Now, a lot of us don't know that because we don't correspond with Luke Richardson, or we didn't correspond with Craig Berube, won a cup, and in Toronto now. We don't correspond with Rick Tocchet, although he did some TV here, and we know how good he is as an analyst and how likable he is. I think Richardson's a guy they would absolutely have to look at, but I don't know enough about his credentials. If he would be a guy that I could sit here and say they should hire if they decided to make that move. I just don't know. One more comes from David Meltzer, not Bill Meltzer, David Meltzer. Jason, first and foremost, love hearing your voice every morning on the podcast. That tells me you're doing well that day with your treatment, and I'm praying for you and hope everything with your health is going well and you will be better quickly. Thank you very much. You see my voice is going out a couple times in this podcast. The first thing that goes when I'm recovering from a treatment is my voice. I lose the power of my voice. I have no idea why. Makes no sense to me. Never lost my voice in my entire life, but this thing's giving it a challenge. He said, anyways, listening to the podcast this morning, I do have a coach who I think can succeed towards. He said, I do believe we need changes to change coaches next year. We need to get a coach that is younger and hopefully can have a successful coaching career and be here for many years as the team improves and becomes a legitimate cup contender. The coach I would consider hiring is Jeff Halpern from Tampa. He's a smart guy, Princeton graduate. That tells me a lot. He's definitely a smart guy. He had to work his butt off as a player and carved out a nice career. Now he's been coaching alongside John Cooper for many years, and hopefully you would be able to bring a lot of that knowledge from him to the Flyers. Not sure if this is a direction that Danny Briere or Keith Jones would go in, but I would strongly consider it. It's a great name. I mentioned Stefan Carberry earlier. You look for those guys, and I look for guys that are attached to guys like John Cooper. I love John Cooper, by the way. I think he's phenomenal. And a guy in his tree intrigues me a ton. He said also, David, in summation, last as an Army vet, thank you for your service, by the way, David. I would love to see the Flyers bring up Parker Gahagan from the Phantoms for one game. I know he does not have an NHL contract, but since we're not making the playoffs this year, it'd be nice to see a fellow vet get a game in the NHL. If he gets the chance, I believe he would be the first ever U.S. Army vet to play a game in the NHL. No, I'd sign that guy. I'd love to see him play. He did just get sent back to the East Coast Hockey League by the Phantoms, so probably not going to happen. They only have one more call-up before they have to dip into emergency call-ups. I would imagine Grobenkin's going to be a call-up at some point. He said, anyways, continue your fight against cancer, and thanks for putting on a great podcast every day for me and the Flyers fans to listen to. Thanks for the note, David. And again, thanks for your service as well. That would be a cool story. I didn't know that there's never been a U.S. Army vet to play a game in the NHL. I would love to see that. That'd be fantastic. And a good name to throw out there, Jeff Halpern. See, that guy's thinking outside the box. Unlike our other guy who said, that's not my job to figure out who should be the next coach. I just want the guy that's here gone. If not him, who? He doesn't want to answer the who. All right. We'll preview Flyers Caps tomorrow as the Flyers road trip will continue in D.C. when they take on the Washington Capitals, first place in the Eastern Conference. We'll do that on tomorrow's episode. Join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.